You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello, everybody. We're back here at Healing Voices Project. I'm Mike Torville, your host of the program at Healing Voices Project, and we're really glad to have you here listening or watching. Today we have a guest, Kevin Rosario from Gosnold Behavioral Health. Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
You're, right now, you serve, and you have worked at Gosnold for the last 9 years.
Correct.
And right now you are the Director of Community Outreach for Gosnold Behavioral Health, and you have a bachelor's degree in business administration.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to school now, working on your MBA.
I am. I'm almost done.
That's great. And you are a nationally certified intervention professional and recovery coach as well.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Well, that's great. I mean, I'm sure you've got your hands full with a lot.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about Gosnold and what happens there, but we really want to talk about you today, right? Your story, what led you to where you are.
Yeah.
I know you've said you're a person in recovery for 13 years.
Correct.
And now you've been at Gosnold for 9 years.
Yep.
So let's go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
And visit the earlier Kevin.
Oh, that guy's a problem. I don't know if you want to meet that guy.
He's not going to reappear here.
No. He's dead.
So, but Kevin, thanks again for coming and
pleasure.
sharing your willingness to share your story a little about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And so let's go back to, first, you are where you are now as a result of a long and probably often painful journey. Let's go back. Where did things start for you?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And thanks again for the invite.
Sure.
I feel grateful to be in a professional position where it's okay to talk about this publicly. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stigma around addiction and mental health. And so people don't get help sometimes because they're afraid of consequences, right? That prevents people from getting help. And then even people getting well don't want people to know they haven't had a problem, so they don't talk about being well or being in recovery, and that's fine. Everyone has the right to their own privacy. I totally respect people that don't want to.
Not to interrupt, do you think that's changing though?
Definitely over the last 5 years or more. I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of energy. There's people like yourself that care and dedicate and try to put it out there, but still the stigma remains. Like if you're, middle-aged person that put their kids through college, that has a house and a professional job, but you've silently had some drinking problem, whether you correct it or not, you don't want to tell people about it. You're afraid of the impact in the community and your career, and I get it. I get it. And so people like yourself and organizations like ours, we want to talk about it. We want to shed light on it. We want to reduce the stigma. We want to share really more about the stories of recovery, of hope, that people do get well, and then we also share on the science of addiction, like how did this happen, right? So that's the question, like, well, how did you get here? What happened? And it doesn't have to be so complex, but you can see in 2 minutes I'm pretty hyped, right? I had a half a cup of coffee at like 5:30 this morning, and if you see me at 6 p.m. tonight, this is where I live. I'm 44 years old. Can you imagine me at 10, right?
Right.
So there's the premise of there's the backdrop. Hyperactive kid, buzzing around in my own skin. And then, some of the other common things, like two great parents. They're still married. They're still together. But my father was a Portuguese immigrant, moved to New Bedford when he was like 17. There was a civil war in Portugal, and started doing like offshore fishing. So wasn't around in the earlier years of my life. So I never learned Portuguese as a kid because my mother is English and Portuguese, but like third generation. Portuguese is not our primary language. And I only say that to say it's another thing that people don't want to talk about, like the old school, like they say, what do they say, Irish Catholic curtains or whatever it is. It's like whatever happens in the home stays in the home.
Right.
You don't talk about it. But a reality is, my father was doing the best he could as an immigrant. The money was inconsistent. Then he got into painting. Painting is, seasonal. And mom had the city job and held it down. And there was often conflict in the house about finances and other things. And I remember as a kid, they're fighting and they're yelling. And it was like, and I have a brother that's 3 years younger than me that's a citizen and a great human. Shout out to Nick. But that's a part of it. So I'm hyperactive. I got this family dynamic, and then I don't know how it happens, but I developed a lot of insecurity and self-esteem issues.
As a young teenager?
Elementary school.
That early, yeah, okay.
Elementary school, I grew up in New Bedford, very diverse community, but the best elementary school at the time, and just to date myself with these young whippersnappers out there, my elementary school, Kearney Academy, was the first elementary school to have a computer program back in the 80s. And I feel so old talking like this, but it's true. My mother literally picked a school that was outside of my district because it was the best school. So now I had to get a waiver and become a magnet student, which means I take a bus from a different district to a school that I don't belong to, which also is situated right across the street from housing projects, right? So now I'm like this white kid in a 2-parent home that they own a 2-family house, and all of my friends are all in the projects, and they have stories. Some of them are great and well-adjusted and had beautiful families. Just living in the projects doesn't inherently make you bad, but generally speaking, being raised by grandma, right? Dad may have a drug problem. Dad may not even be in the picture. Maybe mom's only in the picture and she has a drug problem. And I say that to say, like, I have my own insecurities and my own family dynamic and stuff at home that, like, I'm a little uncomfortable with. And then the people I'm around, often it was much worse. So I can't go to school and complain about, wow, my parents are fighting. They're like, I don't even have parents. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I kind of ate that and kept it to myself, which creates this anxiety. And then I'm like the white kid in a mostly African-American Spanish school, so I'm different. I'm from outside the district, and I just, at a young age, 5th grade, didn't feel like I fit in, and to me, I think that's more important to talk about than, oh yeah, I shot heroin for 9 years. All right, great, but I did shoot heroin for 9 years, and I'm lucky to be alive. I had a couple overdoses. I got 3 DUIs. I've been incarcerated, as a result of my lifestyle. I've had a rough road, but the truth is, and the nature of addiction that some people don't understand is, we need to figure out what was driving it in the first place. Because the truth is, when I got sober at 31 for the 9th time, at 31 years old, I'm like a 10-year-old kid with low self-esteem, with insecurity issues, that don't feel safe, that has some trauma from things that have happened. And like, if you don't address that, then you'll never get well or stay well. Drugs are not the problem. Drugs and alcohol are not the problem. Drugs and alcohol are a temporary solution. Mm-hmm. They're medicine. They're used therapeutically for people like me. And, just to fast forward through that, I would kind of sell out and just be whoever I needed to be accepted by the cool kids, right? I picked a crowd. I went with the hip hop crowd. Like, those are my people, not the skaters, not the rock and rollers, not the gothic people. Like, I was all into hip hop, and I wore all the outfits. And like, people my age will laugh when they hear this, because it was like the Jenko jeans and the cross colors, and like wearing Oshkosh gosh like farmer jeans on with one strap, wearing them backwards, like all this weird stuff that like I make fun of these kids now with their skinny jeans and they're wearing purses and everything. But
do you got pictures of yourself back then?
Oh, I do.
All right.
I do, and I got the ponytail with the one earring.
Yeah.
And when I'm judgy, I can be judgy of all these young kids now, the way they dress. But the truth is, if they were wearing skinny jeans in '85, I probably would have worn skinny jeans just to be down with whoever else was there, right?
Yeah.
So I have to remember that. 5th grade, got bullied like once, scared the crap out of me, never forget it. 6th grade, fell in love with this young lady, kissed another boy in front of me, broke my heart, right?
That's a killer.
Yeah, between the 12 steps, which absolutely saved my life, and ongoing therapy and meditation and just trying to become more aware of what makes me tick, like those two, the family dynamic, the being in a different school, the getting bullied, and then the first little puppy love that went south, those things were the catalyst for my addiction. And when I left elementary school and went to 7th grade, which was Keith Junior High, a new school, and therapists, people use the term, I made an inner vow. My inner vow was, at an early age, I'll never be like my parents who stay together in the Portuguese divorce, sleep in separate bedrooms, hate each other, but don't leave. I'll never be that. I'll never be bullied again, and I'll never let a girl break my heart. And so when I go to 7th grade...
How did that all work out?
Awful. I did all of those things, right? All of those things came full circle in my life, by the way.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time for all of that. But I do think that this part of it is more important, and people can identify with this, because this is the thing. This is the thing that whenever someone tries to stop using whatever they're using, they're not okay. why are they not okay? Is because there's some unsettled business, you know. And what ended up happening in 7th grade, now I'm the class clown, now I'm making fun of other people, now I'm being rowdy and disruptive, now I'm making fun of other kids to take the attention off me because I don't want to be made fun of, right? And then I smoked a joint. Like, the joint's not the problem. The joint is secondary to all this other stuff, right? And my story is, I was hanging around with older kids at a younger age to make me feel safe, right? In 7th grade, I'm hanging around with 8th graders. 8th graders, I'm hanging around with high school kids because of that little bully fear. I never want to be bullied again. So you got to be loud, you got to be tough, you got to be aggressive, you got to hang
defensive mode
all the time, right? And by the end of 7th grade, I found myself selling joints for the older kids, right? And it was like, sell 5 joints, get 1 free.
Yeah.
And then in 8th grade, I tried mescaline for the first time. And by the end of 8th grade, I was selling mescaline. And it wasn't like kingpin drug dealer stuff. It's like, I'm 13 and I don't have any income. If I sell these things, I can consume them for free. And I can just fast forward all through high school because that's my story. It just progressed. It got worse in high school. I'm copping pounds of weed. I'm committing crime. But at the same time, I went to driver's ed. I was the first one of my friends to have a license, first one to have a car, always had a job, worked at Friendly's and Stop and Shop, but I always had that party life. And as a result of those life choices, I'm not a victim of these things, but I've been arrested over 12 times. You know, gun charges, cocaine charges, marijuana charges, breaking and entering, gun charges. Like, I just was making bad decisions hanging around with some rowdy people. And my poor mother would say, like, oh, you know, you got to watch out who you hang out with. I was the one getting arrested, not my friends. I was like way off the rails. Like, I was the problem, not them. Environment always plays a factor.
There's a scene, it just reminded me, on a little off the thing, but remember Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
That show, and the wife was asking the husband, you know, there's people and there's a lot of danger out there, and his response was, I am the danger.
Yeah.
It's almost like it reminded me, like, you're the one that had more than most of the people that you were hanging around with.
Yeah.
So you were the concern that other parents had with their kids. Exactly. Why are you hanging around with Kevin?
But every parent can't see that, right? My mother's a sweetheart, Leave It to Beaver, grew up in a Cushionette, Lifetime movie network for days, right? Glasses halfway full, can't be me, right?
Right.
But the reality was, it was me, you know, and, you know, so we can fast forward all the way through high school, drinking, partying, getting arrested for being a wild kid. And then I got in a car accident at like 18 years old and played the game, my neck and my back to get a lawsuit, right? Because I'm a hustler and I'm hanging around.
Did you cause the accident?
No, it was in the snow. We were stopped at a red light. Someone banged us. Okay. We banged into another car. A teenager. We're like, oh, yeah, neck and back. Go to the lawyer, go to the chiropractor, get prescribed Vicoprofen, which is Vicodin and ibuprofen, and Flexerol, which is a muscle relaxer, and proceeded to continue to drink and smoke weed while on them, and loved that combo. That was the worst thing that ever happened to me, because the combination of the opiate and the muscle relaxer and the alcohol and the weed, which I had been doing pretty consistently, it was like I could finally breathe. Like I could finally relax my shoulders a little bit.
Because you were always tense before.
Always tense. Yeah. Even now, like, I have to catch myself. When I get talking, I'm like, where? The difference is in recovery, I've learned how to de-escalate.
Okay, yeah.
Like, now I can breathe. Yeah. I can pause. I can bring my own heart rate down now. Like, I can even identify, Kevin, you're being manic. Change the tone, the speed, the volume of your voice. These are all regulation
Whereas
skills.
Before, it was another mechanism. Obviously.
Tasmanian devil crashing into walls.
Yeah.
And it was drugs that were the only thing that took the edge off.
Yeah.
So, of course, I start selling Percocets. And I'm using Percocets, and I never got sick. And then OxyContin came out, and everyone said, it's like Percocets without the aspirin. I said, great, I didn't need the aspirin, right? It makes sense. Yeah. So you get these OC20s, they're this big, and they're the power of 4 Percocets, which are 3 times the size. So I start taking OC20s and then OC40s. So what do? I immediately start selling them. I'm always a guy that, I'm not wasting money on drugs. I have a job to pay my bills, and I hustle for my fun, my recreation, the club money, things like that. And within, I don't know, months, less than a year, I was fully blown addicted to it, and I didn't even know it happened because I wasn't hanging around with drug addicts. We were drug dealers, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. We weren't dependent. And I went camping, and when you go camping, I'm not saying that this is how you go camping, but at, 20 years old, the necessities are hot dogs, hamburgers, a couple 30 packs, an ounce of weed, blunts to roll the weed, and that's it, Didn't bring pills because in my mind, I don't need pills. It was a secondary thing. I was a weed smoker, a drinker.
By then you had been taking the pills right along, and now you were going to go some time without them.
Exactly.
And how did that go?
I experienced my first withdrawal, which also changes everything. Like, I think I had one pill, so by Saturday, 90 degrees in July or whatever, hot, cold sweats, bubble guts. Like, man, I feel like flu-like symptoms. And my buddy who's hip, he says, Kev, you're dope sick. I could have punched him in the face. You know what I'm saying? I'm Kevin Rosario. I make money. I sell drugs. I'm not dope sick, right? These pills were not ever classified in that same way in 1999. And he's like, I'm telling you. And he busts one out, and I sniff a line, and in 20 minutes, I'm right as rain. And I feel like, I don't know if it's trauma. I'm not a neurosurgeon. I'm not a therapist. Like, all I know is, like, some part of the brain, the hippocampus, like, this goes into, like, fight or flight survival mode. Like, once your brain says, if you don't have this, you're going to be sick, it creates anxiety that goes and escalates and says, if you don't have this, you're going to die. And from that day forward, I never not had it. It was always making sure I have enough. And then as your habit progresses, you go from $20 a day to $50 a day to $200 a day. Then all of a sudden, like, you can't have it enough. And you're constantly being high and going through withdrawal, high and going through withdrawal.
Because you build up a tolerance, is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you need more and more and more.
More and more.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is your life becomes consumed with, how do I get more money to get more? How do I get more money to get more? Within a year, I found myself sniffing heroin. Within a few months after that, I found myself shooting heroin. And I went from the cool kid with the Cadillacs and the pinky rings and the drug dealing and the keg parties to, like, full-blown heroin addiction within a year of trying OxyContin.
Were you living at home then?
I was.
Your parents?
My parents.
How
yep.
aware were they of what was happening?
So they weren't aware at all. They had a 2-family home. I rented the second floor apartment since I was like 17 because I always had a job and a hustle. And one year, like, tenants moved out, and they're like, well, we'll see if we can sustain the mortgage. We'll let you guys stay there. And then I'm like, well, I'll help with that, you know, and I would pay rent.
Yeah.
So I kind of had my own place at a young age, which also didn't help the lifestyle. It was, like, really good. And my parents were, like, just not aware that this was happening because you physically couldn't even tell until it got to heroin. So I got years of drinking and partying and pills and unhealthy, unsafe behavior before I got to heroin. And then within a few months of heroin, it gets ugly fast. And then comes methadone clinics. I was on methadone for a year and then got kicked off because I got in a fist fight in the methadone clinic, and then I got back on the other methadone clinic. And then finally in 2004, I got my second DUI and an ammunition charge. I got caught drunk driving. I had a box of bullets in the car, and I got arrested for the first time at 16, and I got arrested every single year, at least once a year, for the next 8 years straight. And at 24, I would get continued without a findings. They're called QOFs, right? I would plea out and get probation. And at 24, on 90 milligrams of methadone, still actively using drugs, I got that charge, and my lawyer was like, you're going to jail. There's no more negotiating. It's just a matter of, we're going to negotiate the length.
You hit the limit.
They were done.
Yeah.
Fancy lawyer. He saved me a lot of jail time for sure, but when it came down to it, it was like done. And this, I got to, like, fast forward because be mindful of your time. But this was also an important turning point for me because it's 2004. I'm going to jail. I'm not going to jail on methadone. So I play the game. I come down on the clinic, get down to like 15 milligrams. I go to detox, CSS, halfway house. I'm in a program, getting slip signed, playing the game because now I'm playing the I'm a drug addict card. Please help me. And to be honest with you, it worked. That's why when I see people in treatment or in the 12-step halls, I'm like, I don't care why you're here. Just try to listen. Because what happened in 2004 was instead of going to jail for 2 years, I pled out to 6 months. Got out of jail, started selling cars, wrapped probation, started selling weed again, did well for a while.
You were selling weed, but you weren't using.
I was using it also.
Okay.
I was using, as soon as I wrapped probation, I started smoking the weed again, and I was selling it, and all went well for a while. And then no program, no recovery, no higher power, no therapy, no nothing, just don't use so you don't go back to jail was like the only guiding force. Next thing you know, I got a Cadillac, I got the jewelry, I'm making $1,000 a week, I'm renting cars, I'm renting houses in Newport. On paper, I'm killing it at life, my parents are proud of me, but I'm still not okay. I still don't feel equal to. I feel like something's missing, right? And we learn in recovery, there's a spiritual void. There's an emotional problem. There's something in me that is always looking for this perfect scenario and looking for these things to make me feel good. And they work for a little bit, but they don't eventually in the long run. And I got all this stuff. I'm killing it at life. Everybody's proud of me. And my brain says, look how good you're doing. Look how far you've come. You were a heroin addict. You were on methadone. You went to jail. You beat probation for the first time in 8 years, because I never finished probation in the 8 years prior. Maybe you can have a couple beers. Stay away from the coke and the pills and the heroin.
It's your reward.
With these professional salespeople. These are citizens.
Yeah.
I'm not in the projects now,
Right.
And the worst thing that can happen to someone like me is that I went out and I drank and had a blast. I didn't black out. I didn't throw up. I didn't get in a fight. And what that did was set off this mental obsession. I couldn't wait for next weekend to go back out again. And then after a couple months, I couldn't wait. And now I'm drinking on Wednesday and Saturday. And after a couple months, I'm drinking a few days a week. And then next thing you know, I draw another line in the sand. Well, as long as I don't do opiates, well, it's just perks. Well, as long as I don't sniff it, now I'm sniffing OxyContin. Well, as long as you don't go to heroin, shooting heroin. And it took a full year from my first drink before I put a needle back in my arm. But I still put a needle back in my arm. After everything I'd been through, I threw it all away. And then it's a clearance sale, right? Everything must go. The car's gone, the jewelry's gone, the job's gone. I'm living at mom's house. I'm collecting unemployment. I'm shoplifting for the drug dealer. I'm overdrafting my accounts. It gets to the point where that's not even enough. I'm stealing jewelry from my family, pawning it, and all the chaos that comes with that. Until finally, July 2nd, 2010, I'm just broken. And people always say, well, what was the thing? It wasn't a thing. Like, my best friend died May 2nd, 2010, Nick Winchenbach. That was a huge thing. But I was so morally broken and disgusted with myself. Like, they say, well, triggers and relapse prevention. A trigger was as soon as I woke up in the morning. And relapse prevention was like, get as much booze and opiates and benzos to sleep as much of the day as possible, because if I'm sleeping, I'm not causing harm. And then the lucid moments in between are like, I don't want to do this anymore. I wish I wouldn't wake up, but I don't have the courage to kill myself. And why 2004 was important, even though I didn't really want to be in recovery, was I went to a meeting every day for like 10 months. I was in a program for like 10 months. And so in 2010, when I was really broken and really ready to do anything, I remembered what those 12-step people said. They said, if you want any chance of staying in recovery, you got to pray in the morning and pray at night. Try not to use for one day. Go to a meeting, get a sponsor, work the steps. And so day one in detox, I prayed to my best friend that died. That was the best I can do. I hated religion and church and God, and I was so sick. But I could pray to my best friend, and that got me through a few months. And then I got to a halfway house, and I got a sponsor, and I did the steps, and I had a therapist. And for the first 3 months, I was on non-narcotic psych meds because I was not okay. They had to put me on antidepressants and sleep meds and anxiety meds. And I'm grateful because it helped me slow down a little bit to get to the next step, And then, when I went through the 12 steps, something just amazing happened. Like, one, I completely lost the obsession to drink and use. It was just gone, and it has been gone. And my spirit was just like renewed. I had this reality check that I'm not a gangster, I'm not a playboy, I'm not a tough guy, I'm not a New Bedford rah-rah. I was a broken little boy.
Do you attribute that to any particular thing, or did it just happen in the process?
It's the process.
Yeah, okay.
So the process is like pray in the morning, pray at night, go to meetings, be of service in the 12-step community. But also, you write out like your whole life. You write down everyone that's ever pissed you off, every fear you've ever had, every piece of questionable sex conduct. And there's a series of like 20 questions that you put to that. And it's like, it's intellectual, but it's spiritual and it's emotional because you're asking God to help you see the truth. And like, I went from being rah-rah, I'm a tough guy, I'm a victim, my parents suck, New Bedford sucks, the cops sucks, to like, oh, I put myself in all these places. And like, once you can accept that, oh, I sold drugs, that's why I got arrested. Oh, I committed crimes, that's why I kept, and when I really looked at the truth of the matter, like, I'm the problem. New Bedford's not the problem. I made decisions based on self that put me in every hairy situation I was ever in. Other people played their part and other people did bad things. I've literally been stabbed in the back, I've been shot at, I've been jumped. But if I'm not living the life I'm living, I'm not in a position for that to happen. And it was like all my anger was lifted. And I went out in the world and started looking at people in the eye and not saying sorry, but saying like, I know I've harmed you. And is there anything I can do? And owning what I did. And my life forever changed, and that since then, by the way, and I think this is important, 13 years later, I still pray every morning and pray every night. I still go to a couple meetings a week. I just went through the 12 steps again because life happens and you get resentful and you get fearful. And the symptoms of the disease of addiction come back. The symptoms are not always drinking and drugging. Anger, fear, resentment, insecurity, self-pity, gambling, sex, buying too much stuff on Amazon, golfing 3 times a week instead of once a week, right? My disease can manifest in all these other areas to try to make me feel good when I don't feel good. And the truth is, I just need that connection with that higher power. I need to go back to God, and I need to take away the poison that's been blocking me. So 13 years later, like, I'm still doing the do, and I've been super blessed. Like, life hasn't always been easy, but as a result of recovery, I've repaired my credit. I got excellent credit. When I came in, I was like a 480 credit score and owed thousands of dollars. Now I'm a 750, right? Went back to school, chipped away at an associate's degree, then a bachelor's degree. It took me 10 years because I went part-time, have a full-time intense job, still active in recovery.
Again,
I'm still now I'm in an accelerated program at Fitchburg State, which is like 7-week classes, no breaks, back to back to back to back. And God willing, in May, I'm going to have a master's degree, an MBA with a focus in healthcare. Got 2 beautiful kids, a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. Well, they're 3.5 and 2.5. And the reality is like, me and their mom didn't work out, and that's been tough on all parties. And that's why I went through the steps again. But with the help of my higher power and my recovery network, people that helped me get through these tough things, I still haven't thought about drinking. I haven't thought about getting high. And I generally have a good attitude. And I'm grateful. She's a good mom. She's a mom in recovery. I got 2 beautiful, healthy kids. They don't have disabilities. Like, I am so blessed. I don't have all the fancy stuff I used to have or that I would like to have, but I have more than what I need.
You don't want that Cadillac back?
I mean, I wouldn't mind the Cadillac back, you know what I mean? But if you give me the Cadillac and a broken spirit, or the Altima I'm driving now and a full spirit, I'll take the Altima.
And recovery doesn't come with everything turning suddenly perfect.
No.
Is your point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and I had a good run. I probably had a good 8 or 9 years that were pretty good. Yeah. Mostly blessings, and got in a relationship, got pregnant back to back in the middle of COVID. I wasn't taking care of my program and my spirit, and things got crazy. And we do the couples counseling thing, and I share that because it's easy to come and spit fire and act like I pee rainbows and butterflies all days. The truth is, people have died, tough things have happened, but I didn't drink or use anyway as a result of recovery. Yeah. Not because I'm lucky, not because I'm strong, because I gain access to the power.
You found different ways to not only cope, to deal with and overcome those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm truly blessed. I love my job. I've been working in the field of addiction for almost 12 years now. I started a side gig working with kids because my passion is adolescence. So I started a speaking and consulting thing where I'll go into a high school with 650 kids in an auditorium and not just share my story, but share science and talk about the developing brain and the limbic system and how dopamine plays into that, and helping them understand their genetic predisposition if they have that puts them at an increased risk, right? Adverse childhood experiences, the more traumas and experiences that you've had that create pain on your spirit puts you at an increased risk to become addicted if you experiment, and make it more educational, informative, and I just love doing that.
I'd love to share that, and maybe in a future show. And because I think we could spend easily a half hour talking about that topic, and talk about what you talk about with these students. That would be great. And now, obviously, you said you got into the counseling at 12 years ago, or so a year or so into your recovery. Right?
Yeah. No, 2 years. So
2 years into it?
So it's probably 11 and a half in the industry.
Okay, yeah.
I was 2 years into recovery, and I started working for High Point Treatment Center in Brockton, and I was doing community support provider. I was picking people up, bringing them to appointments. I did that for 2 years. Then I came to Gosnold, and they got me certified as a recovery coach, an interventionist, and a family coach, which every 2 years I get the credentials, and I continue to do that. But I've never really been a counselor, and I haven't been working in direct patient care for about 8 years. After about a year and a half at Gosnold, I started doing community talking, and I started, reaching out and letting other people know, one, recovery is possible, what resources are available. And then after another year, there was an opportunity to get really more into the marketing business development side. And now that's where I've been for the better part of 7 years. I report directly to the CEO. I'm not a senior leader, but I work very closely with the senior leaders. And it's how do we get the word out there about Gosnold? How do we promote services? How do we expand services? How do we improve patient care? How do we reduce AMA and lack of engagement? How do we keep people so we can do the work that we do? And I just love it. I love it. And I started going to school, 10 years ago thinking I'm a sales guy. I'm going to go to big business. I'm going to make $300,000 a year because if I don't shoot heroin, I'm pretty successful, right? This is the brain and the ego, by the way. And the next thing you know, I'm working in behavioral health for $12 an hour. And I'm like, oh my God, this is where I need to be. And my spirit got lit on fire. And so I'm like, okay, how can I use my sales and my business brain in this space? And so now the goal is like, how do I become COO, CEO of a Gosnold type place, executive director? How do I implement change and policy and programming? How can I make an impact? So now that's why I chose healthcare as the focus in the MBA. So instead of going back to corporate world, I want to have an impact here and use my skills and my passion to, have an impact and make change.
Skills, passion, and energy.
Energy. I got that.
And right now your job is Director of Community Outreach.
Correct.
At Gosnold. And just a shout out to Gosnold. What's the website and phone number?
Yep, Gosnold is gosnold.org. Pretty simple, www.gosnold.org. People often spell it with an A, so I will say it's GOSNOLD.org. And the 800 number is 1-800-444-1554. And you can feel free to call that number. You can call me. You can email me. My email is krosario@gosnold.org. My cell is 774, scratch that, that's my personal, 508-274-4477. I do carry 2 phones, but I'm always available and accessible, and if I'm not the guy, I'll point you in the right direction.
Well, Gosnold, I tell you, it's lucky to have you, and you've got quite an experience.
Yeah, thank you.
And appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. All right.
Yes, sir.
Yep, and thanks everybody for listening. And tune in again, because we're going to also share a lot of what Kevin's doing at Gosnold in an upcoming episode. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. And thanks again, Kevin, for coming down.
My pleasure.
All right.
Yeah.